He has locked his phone in a timed safe. He has unplugged his internet, hidden his books, and eaten nothing but plain white rice all day. Kabir is undergoing a 24-hour dopamine detox. He was promised that by starving his brain of pleasure, he would instantly unlock superhuman focus, pure motivation, and absolute clarity. But within 12 hours, Kabir doesn't feel enlightened. He feels utterly miserable, intensely bored, and hit by a sudden wave of deep depression. Kabir is finding out the hard way about the massive, unscientific lie of internet self-help culture. His detox didn't reboot his brain. It broke his system. Today, we expose the ugly truth of the dopamine detox, the real neuroscience of receptor downregulation, and the exact psychological shift you actually need to fix your attention span. Part 1. The Pop Science Illusion. Kabir is a 26-year-old software developer who found himself caught in the modern attention trap. He couldn't write 3 lines of code without scrolling through video feeds. He couldn't eat a meal without watching a stream. His brain felt fried, overstimulated, and chronically distracted. Desperate for a solution, he watched a viral video on internet self-help culture that promised a miracle cure. The video told him that his brain was flooded with dopamine from modern technology, and that by cutting off all forms of simulation for 24 hours, his neural pathways would magically reset. Kabir bought into the hype. He treated dopamine like a toxic chemical sloshing around in his skull that needed to be flushed out. But neurologically, Kabir was operating on a completely flawed model of human biology. He was a victim of the chemical drain myth. In behavioral neuroscience, dopamine is not a toxin, and it is not even the molecule of pleasure. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward prediction error. It is the neurological fuel that drives exploration, learning, and movement. Your brain does not store dopamine in a bucket that can be drained or refilled. You cannot detox from a neurotransmitter that your body naturally manufactures every single second to keep your heart beating and your mind awake. By locking himself in a blank room and forcing absolute sensory deprivation, Kabir didn't clear his system. He simply subjected his nervous system to an unnatural, violent drop in environmental baseline stimulation, and his brain responded the only way it knew how, by throwing him into a state of acute emotional withdrawal. Part 2. The Homeostasis Strike. By hour 14 of his detox, Kabir's initial burst of heroic willpower completely collapsed. The boredom wasn't peaceful. It was agonizing. His mind began to loop through dark, obsessive thoughts. He felt an intense, hollow ache in his chest. He looked at the white wall and felt a terrifying sense of meaninglessness. Kabir was experiencing the homeostasis strike. The human brain is governed by a fundamental law, homeostasis, the constant struggle to maintain a stable internal environment. When Kabir spent months scrolling through high dopamine digital feeds, his brain adjusted to the massive, unnatural flood of artificial stimulation by down-regulating its dopamine receptors. It essentially turned down the volume knob of his brain's reward center so the system wouldn't fry. This is why ordinary life, like reading a book or working on a project, started to feel boring to him. He had plenty of dopamine, but fewer working baseball gloves to catch it. When Kabir suddenly dropped his environmental stimulation to absolute zero during his detox, his brain didn't instantly sprout new receptors. That takes weeks of biological cellular adaptation. Instead, his down-regulated brain was left with turned-down volume knobs in a completely silent room. He couldn't process the ordinary beauty of the present moment because his neurological sensors were temporarily numb. He had forced himself into a state of neural starvation, causing his nervous system to trigger a wave of intense dysphoria and anxiety to force him to go find a stimulus. Before we watch the devastating moment, Kabir breaks his detox and enters a dangerous biological loop. Let's make sure your own focus strategy isn't built on pop science myths. If you want to stop falling for trendy internet fads and start rebuilding your attention span using authentic, raw behavioral neuroscience, hit that subscribe button. We decode the true mechanics of human behavior every single week so you can protect your mind. Now, let's look at the dark aftermath of Kabir's fast. Part 3. The Elastic Binge. At hour 20, Kabir couldn't take it anymore. The psychological friction was too heavy. He unlocked his safe, grabbed his phone, and opened his favorite app, telling himself, "I'll just check one notification." The moment the screen lit up, Kabir's brain didn't experience a calm, controlled reset. It experienced a cataclysmic, explosive dopamine volcano known as the Elastic Binge Effect. Because he had starved his brain of sensory input for an entire day, the contrast between the blank wall and the vibrant, flashing pixel screen was wider than it had ever been. In behavioral economics, this is called a contrast enhancement error. His brain's reward prediction matrix completely miscalculated the value of the digital feed. The notification didn't just feel good, it felt euphoric. Kabir spent the next 5 hours straight in a vegetative state, hyper-binging on videos, junk food, and video games until 4 a.m. He consumed twice as much trash content as he would have on a normal day. His 24-hour extreme fast hadn't cured his addiction. It had hypersensitized it. He had taught his subconscious mind a terrifying new lesson. Deprivation is painful, and the screen is the only thing that can save us. He ended up further away from real-world discipline than before he started. Part 4. The Dopamine Realignment Protocol. How did Kabir actually fix his brain? He threw away the concept of a detox and implemented a sustainable, science-backed framework called the Dopamine Realignment Protocol. Step 1. He stopped trying to fight a biological chemical with raw willpower. Kabir realized that if his phone was sitting on his desk, his brain was constantly spending subconscious energy suppressing the urge to pick it up. This is called cognitive load fatigue. He engineered a high-friction environment. He placed his router on a mechanical timer that cut off the internet at 9 p.m. automatically. He left his phone charging in the kitchen when he went to his bedroom to work. By removing the visual cues, he stopped the constant micro spikes of anticipation. Step 2. He integrated micro doses of boredom. Instead of a radical 24-hour shock to his system, Kabir started practicing what neuroscientists call low-stimulus transitions. When he stood in line at a coffee shop or waited for an elevator, he forced himself to keep his hands in his pockets for just 2 minutes. He let his brain experience the ordinary, low-friction rhythm of reality without an immediate digital pacifier. This slow, gentle approach allowed his dopamine receptors to naturally upregulate over several weeks without triggering a homeostatic strike. Step 3. He tied dopamine to physical effort. Kabir stopped consuming content before doing his work. He flipped his daily sequence. He wrote his software code for 2 hours in the morning, experiencing the raw, unglamorous friction of cognitive labor, and used an hour of gaming in the evening as a deliberate, controlled, phasic reward. By realigning his behavior so that dopamine was the consequence of effort rather than the prerequisite, his brain rebuilt its natural resilience. Within a month, Kabir's focus returned. He didn't need a blank room. He just needed a balanced biological design. The internet version of a dopamine detox is ultimately an act of ego-driven performance art. It promises an overnight spiritual awakening because human beings love extreme dramatic stories over slow, boring consistency. But your brain is an ecosystem, not an engine block that you can spray clean with a pressure washer. Stop trying to starve your biology. Stop treating your natural drive for reward like an enemy. The goal isn't to live in an unnatural, cold world devoid of pleasure. The goal is to become the master of your environment rather than its slave. Put your phone in the other room. Sit with the ordinary friction of your work and let your brain rebuild its power step by step in the dirt of real life. Have you ever tried a 24-hour dopamine detox only to end up binging on your phone the very next day? Let's stop falling for the pop science trends and build a real scientific game plan in the comments below. Give this video a like if you're ready to realign your brain for real execution, and I'll see you in the next one.